just wanna stay bad, stay mad. Chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back. I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me. Ain't nobody like that.
What's up, Burgundy Brigade? It's your boy, Burgundy Boss, back with another episode of the Burgundy Broadcast. So let me tell you, it's been a minute since I've been on here. I kind of went on a little bit of a hiatus. I've been focusing on myself professionally and trying to get back into the swing of things. You know, the holidays are over. Everything is over. And I'm back and I'm ready to start making content out the wazoo for y'all. I'm so excited right now. So today we're going to talk about, some of those head coaching openings and some of the candidates that have been hired for those opportunities. And, we've had some GM positions that have been filled. We're going to get into that. So with all that being said, thank you for having me back on your screen, in your homes, in your hands once again. Let's hop right into it. So we had Jacksonville, who had fired Urban Meyer. We had Chicago, who fired Matt Nagy. We had the Giants, who fired everybody, including Joe Judge, and rightfully so. We had the Raiders, who, John Gruden doing John Gruden things that are unspeakable, way back when, in the middle of the season. We've got Denver, who just decided that, Vic Fangio, he just wasn't enough. He's not going to get him there. And then you've got Minnesota. They fired everybody. They said, you know what? We go 8-8 every year. We're tired of it. We don't want it no more. And then you go on. Miami, there was a clinch, or there was a riff in the front office, You got Brian Flores, who's butting heads with Chris Greer down there, over Watson and Tua and who should be the quarterback and should we go after a quarterback and do we need to trade Tua? And, everybody's got their own opinion on it. So they didn't like each other's opinions. And so the owner chose the GM over the head coach. They let the head coach go. Cool. Then we move on to Houston. This one doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, Houston, David Cole was doing a good job. He was doing a good job. He was doing what he could with what he had. That's all I can say about that. And they still decided that it still wasn't good enough. He was, as has been said, a bridge coach if there ever was one, because, they had no intention on keeping him long term. He was, we need a guy who's a head coach, so he's got lots of NFL experience. We'll throw him in there and see what he can do for us. There was no plans on keeping him long term. Then you go to Houston. No, I'm sorry. You go to New Orleans, where Sean Peyton shocks the world this week and says, you know what, guys? I'm going to step away from football for a couple of years. I'm going to step away for a little bit. I'm not really feeling it right now. Does that have to do with them being $74 million under the cap? Over the cap, I'm sorry. They're over, not under. But you know what I meant. Negative. They have negative $74 million in cap space for next year. It could, or it could be just a personal decision that he made that he wanted to take a couple years away. He's been doing this for a long time, and maybe he just needs a minute away. I don't know. But we've had some fillings. We've had some guys get hired. So Minnesota hired their GM, the man from Cleveland. I forget his name. He has a funny name, but they hired him. Chicago hired Kansas City's assistant GM, Ryan Poles. Good for them. And the Giants hired Ryan Schoen, the assistant GM in Buffalo. So solid moves. Nothing that was like super questionable. Those were pretty much the top 3 GM candidates, and they all got hired. And only one of them is white. So there is some ethnicity being passed around the NFL. I know that's kind of like a hot topic among, football fans and NFL fans in general is, the lack of color in the head coaching and the front offices in the NFL. So it's good to see that going on. But we only have 2 hires going on right now. We have So, as far as the who's been hired thing, there have been two confirmed hirings that are like, we have been hired. The first one is Nathaniel Hackett, who was the offensive coordinator in Green Bay the last few years, and Matt Eberflus, who was the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis since Frank Reich got there. And ironically, he was actually hired by Josh McDaniels, but not McDaniels. But Frank Reich liked him so much that he decided to keep him, and he stayed there until he got this head coaching job. So let's start with Nathaniel Hackett. Great endorsement by Aaron Rodgers. A guy that Aaron loves. That's his guy. Him and LaFleur might get after it a little bit, but him and Nathaniel Hackett, they're tight. So all of these rumors we've been hearing about Rodgers to Denver, before Nathaniel Hackett was hired as a head coach, we're like, dang, now they're really on. Now we've really got something to talk about because you've got that connection. He's already endorsed the guy. He's already talked about the guy. And so now you're like, it only makes sense for that to happen now. So that's how we feel about Nathaniel Hackett. And I'm so glad that Denver did this too, for Denver's sake, because they have tried the whole, we'll just have a super strong defense and the offense can do just enough to keep us in games. They've tried that. It does not work. It doesn't work for them. They have collapses on defense that make that not happen. The offense is never good enough like they need it to be to make that happen. So you have to move on. And you bring in Nathaniel Hackett, and he's going to come in, and he's going to give you that offense that you have. Like, they tried the whole, our defense is going to be super good, and then we'll invest in the offense and hope the offense can be enough. They have invested in that offense. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Noah Fant, like several first-round picks in weapons. You've got first-round picks on that line. Garrett Bowles is there. You've invested early picks on running backs. You've got Melvin Gordon. You've got Javonte Williams. They've played well towards the tail end of the year. So I think that Denver is in good hands. And now we shift over to Chicago. I know you guys are not going to like this, but I don't like it. It's not what you needed. You already had the strong defense. And yes, I realize you tried the young offensive mind. Listen, Andy Reid's coaching tree, I hate to say this. Andy Reid's coaching tree is kind of like the Belichick coaching tree. Like, Andy Reid's guys, the offensive guys typically don't work out. The defensive guys have. But I don't like this because they already had a strong defense. You didn't need to bring in a defensive-minded guy to make it stronger. Like, they had one of the best defenses in the NFL last year. Just nothing on offense. You've got this rookie quarterback with limited weapons. I mean, you're getting nothing out of Allen Robinson. Your primary weapon is Darnell Mooney, who, listen, if I'm just being straight with y'all, is a healthy Deshaun Jackson. That's what he is. Like, he's a deep threat. He'll hit you over the top for 60, 70 yards. I don't like it. They needed to invest on the offensive side. They needed to invest free agency and draft picks in that offensive line, get weapons for Justin Fields, and then get an offensive coordinator, offensive mind in there who can excel Justin Fields in the areas that he is strong in. And to not use him to his disadvantage and, well, we're just going to do the Denver thing and we're going to overload the defensive side and just hope the offense can do just enough. Why don't you ask some of the other teams that have tried that around the NFL and see how that works? Because it hasn't worked for them, which is why those sort of teams are hiring head coaches again, because they tried that and it didn't work. But, you got to swing for the fences, I guess. I really would have liked a Byron Leftwich or a Brian Dable for this job. Like that would have been perfect. I would have been so ecstatic, but instead they go the opposite direction with it. They go the defensive side, and you know, all things considered, this was probably the best guy they could have got. If they're going to go defense, this is probably the best guy they could have got defensively. So, with that being said, I'm going to run through all the other teams that have hiring, and we'll talk about, you know, most of the teams have kind of narrowed it down to some finalists, and we'll talk about who those finalists are. All right, let's get into this. So the first team I'm going to talk about is Jacksonville, who, as we talked about earlier, Urban Meyer came in as a college coach and was a total flop. I mean, out there treating the NFL like he's still in college, and all he needs to do is yell at these boys and motivate them to be the best young men that they can be, and that's not going to work in the NFL. But they have a complicated situation going on. So they have narrowed it down to basically who they want. They have their guy. It's Byron Leftwich. But as was reported earlier in the offseason, like after week 18, a lot of the head coaching candidates don't want to work with Trent Baalke with good reason. Like, look what happened in San Francisco when he was there. He made John Harbaugh run to college, and he was fired and somehow got offered a job in Jacksonville. I don't know how that happened, but their lead candidate is Byron Leftwich, but he has already said that he does not want to work with Trent Baalke, and the guy he wants is Adrian Wilson, who is, a former player, played for Arizona for a long time, and then immediately stepped into their front office. And he is one of the hot young front office members looking for a job, or looking for a GM job, I should say, because he's like an assistant GM there. So, but that's the guy that Byron Leftwich wants. But if they decide to side with the GM, like Miami did, expect a name like Vic Fangio or one of these older like retread coaches to come out and to just kind of be the yes man for Trent Baalke. That's the situation in Jacksonville. The Giants is kind of interesting as well, because I definitely thought this was Brian Flores' job to lose. I thought that's just who they were going to go after. And yes, I know I've come out and I've said it's going to be one of the Buffalo assistants. It's got to be. I still believe that's what's going to happen. But I thought with Flores out there, no question about it, like they're going to go after Flores, because, Flores is the type of guy that they really need. But so their top two candidates right now are Brian Dable and Leslie Frazier. Just like I said, they would both the Buffalo assistants. And then like a back burner is Brian Flores. They're like, we like you, but we like these other two guys better. So if I had to guess which guy's going to win that job, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Leslie Frazier. Because I think sooner rather than later, Miami, and we'll talk about this later, but Miami gets Dable, is all I'll say. Next team is the Vegas Raiders. They really haven't done a lot. I mean, they interviewed Rich Bisaccia, but he's already been hired by Chicago under Matt Eberflus as their special teams coordinator. So he's not going to be the head coach there. And the only guy that they seem to have any interest in right now is Josh McDaniels. Now, another guy that we've all heard rumbles about, and we've heard that he's the guy to watch, is John Harbaugh. Like he might be coming out of college, do the pro thing again. He really has kind of stated that he wants to come back, and the ownership there in Vegas, they really like to swing for the fences. R.I.P. Al Davis, he's the kind of guy that does that kind of stuff. So I would not put it past him, not a bit. But if Josh McDaniels comes there, expect him to really revamp that offense and really inject like a lot of capital into that offense to fix it, and probably to flush out a lot of that negative energy that they've got in Vegas. They've went through a lot of turmoil. They've had a lot of bad apples out there. So we will see if he's hired what he's going to do to that offense. The next team is Minnesota, and Minnesota is really like a mystery. So they just finalized their GM this past week, and they've been pretty quiet, but it definitely seems like they want a defensive coordinator. And the lead candidate I'm hearing right now is DeMeco Ryans, who is currently the defensive coordinator in San Francisco. He took over for Robert Saleh, and he got a little bit of head coaching buzz last year, but it wasn't he went on like one or two interviews. It wasn't a lot of buzz. It was just a little bit kind of media buzz. It was like, this is the guy to watch out for. So, but he's currently the lead candidate in Minnesota, and look for some other D coordinators to get interviews there as well. We talked about Miami, Daboll. Daboll has even come out and said that he prefers the Miami situation to the Giants situation because he was the one that convinced Nick Saban at Alabama to start Tua Tagovailoa over Jalen Hurts. And it ended up working out and ended up turning into a national championship for them. Miami has Tua. Miami has Jalen Waddle, who were the two keys in that Alabama offense that year when they won the national championship. So look for that connection to return. He was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. I think that's where he ends up going. Now, another couple, they really want an offensive guy. They really need to find out what they have in Tua Tagovailoa. So the other guys that they're interested are Mike McDaniel, who's the offensive coordinator for San Francisco, and Kellen Moore, who everybody knows is the offensive coordinator in Dallas. Those are the two guys that I've also heard they have high interest in. So I think Minnesota is definitely going to bring in a defensive guy. I definitely think Miami's going to bring in an offensive guy to be their next head coach. And, teams do that a lot. They'll bring in an offensive guy and then a defensive guy. And then, when one doesn't work out, they flip-flop over to the other. And, eventually you just hope that something works out. On to the next team. Houston is my next team. And really the only buzz that we've heard from Houston, and there hasn't been a lot. The only buzz that I've heard is that Houston might bring in Brian Flores and could use Brian Flores to convince Deshaun Watson to stay in Houston. I don't know if that's going to work. That's just what I'm hearing. And Flores is the only guy that's interviewed for the Houston job so far. And the final team on my list is New Orleans. And New Orleans is very interesting. Now, this is still a very fresh thing because Sean Peyton, just decided to step away this past week. So they really haven't had time to get somebody to step in and to bring guys in for interviews to really determine what they want. But I would not be shocked if they brought in a defensive guy. And I really wouldn't be shocked if this is the job that Brian Flores decides to take. There's a lot to like in New Orleans, but man, that cap situation. I don't know if there's been a worse cap situation in NFL history. You're talking $74 million over the cap. But I also was listening to the PFF tailgate podcast, and they were talking about how even though New Orleans has the least cap space, the most over the cap, the biggest hole, if you will, they also have the most negotiable amount of money possible. And, we sit here and we wonder, how New Orleans is able to do this year after year where they're so deep in cap and then they renegotiate with all these guys and they get that cap number back where it needs to be and they just barely get above water. Like, and they're able to get their guys back. It's just a miracle. So shout out to Mickey Loomis and the whole New Orleans front office for what they're able to do year in, year out, bringing their guys back and staying under the cap number. That's really going to do it today for me. Burgundy Boss is back. I'm back. And we're going to be pushing out content, pretty much every day, every other day, something like that. We hope to be in your living room, in your hands, in your home, giving you the NFL insight that you need here on the Burgundy Boss podcast. I'm your host, Burgundy Boss.